According to James Clear in Atomic Habits, great book, by the way, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Hey there, welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. Roger Whitney here. It's a show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but have the confidence, because you're doing the work, to lean in and rock retirement. Today, we're going to answer a number of your questions. And in addition to that, in our Bring It On segment, Kevin Lyles, coach in the Rock Retirement Club, and I are going to talk about how to foster passion, things to wake up for, purpose in retirement. Before we get to that, I got two things I want to talk about. Number one is we are looking for volunteers for our retirement plan live case study that we do every January. This year, we're going to work through the opportunities and issues that a late marriage couple has in integrating finances and focusing on rocking retirement together, but also taking care of maybe family that they brought into the marriage and assets they brought into the marriage. So if that fits you, in our 6-Shot Saturday email, we're going to have a form that you can complete, and then we'll review all of those and reach out to a number of you that have raised your hand and choose someone that we're going to get to know in January as we talk through on the show with them, building out a retirement plan of record and addressing the issues that occur when you bring assets and maybe other family into a blended family later in life. So we're excited about that. If you are not signed up for our newsletter, 6-Shot Saturday, you can go to 6shotsaturday.com or rogerwhitney.com. That is our weekly email where we send out a summary of the show, but also links to maybe resources that we mention or forums that we have for things like this. So you can get on that list if you want to raise your hand and focus on rocket retirement. All right. One thing I want to talk about briefly before we get to your questions is this idea of systems. I love this quote. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Your systems, a lot of times, are just your habits. And I was having some fun on Twitter the other day. I don't go on there a lot, but when I do, it's usually with other financial planner friends. And I was tweeting pictures of some protocols I have. And I'm building a library of protocols, which are my habits that I'm working to integrate a little bit more sharply or in more detail in my life. And I shared a photo of my pre-meeting protocol. So I like this word protocol. It has a number of meanings. The definition I like best is a detailed plan of a procedure. So I established a pre-meeting protocol that I execute every time I go into or before a client meeting. And maybe I'll put a link to this or a photo of this in 6-Shot Saturday. So number one is I clean my desk and my notepad. Number two, I open up Asana, which is project management software. And then as part of that, I open up Asana, I open up the financial planning software, I open up the Excel spreadsheet and any other materials I need for this client. Number three is I do some sort of exercise, 10 push-ups, sit-ups, burpees, what have you. 4, I center myself and I breathe and I repeat the names of the people I'm about to meet with. And then I say, I've got this, let's go. And then I log on and have the meeting. So that's an example of a protocol that I use every time I'm getting ready to go into a client meeting. And the purpose of it is to close the loops of everything I've been doing, center myself so I can focus specifically on the people I'm going to chat with. Now, I am building these kind of protocols in all sorts of areas of my life, including what do I do? What's my bedtime ritual? What's my morning ritual? And so these ideas of protocols, these are those systems that get us out of goals, which are nice intentions, because ultimately we become and are our habits. So this is a way of building a more defined habit, in this case, in going into a client meeting. Now, do I do that every time? No, because I'm trying to build this as something that I won't need a little note card that I have. I won't need the library because I do it naturally, but initially it takes a little work to build these kind of protocols. It's the same way for you when you're building or managing your retirement plan. When you're thinking of rebalancing, as an example, your portfolio, there should be a protocol that you follow to rebalance your portfolio. If you're going to make changes to your investment structure, there should be some protocol that you follow so that we are not unmoored and just making more emotional decisions, because we're going to fall to the level of these systems, especially when we're under stress. And that's the key there. These can save us when we're extremely fearful or when we're extremely optimistic. These protocols can save us from getting too far over our skis or bailing or making poor decisions. So I like this idea of protocols. In our Smart Sprint between now and the end of the year, what I'm going to do is suggest one action you take for end of year planning, which is a good protocol to have. It's near the end of the year. There are opportunities and risks that you should think about when it comes to financial life with the close of the calendar year. So we're going to try to give you one thing you can do each week. With that, let's move on and answer some of your questions. If you have a question or a comment for the show, you can go to askroger.me and you can type in your question or comment. You can leave an audio message and we'll do our best to try to answer your question on the show to help you take a baby step towards rocking retirement. So our first question is an audio question from Teresa.
Hi, Roger. Congratulations on your milestone this year with your podcast. I wanted to get your thoughts on some strategies for using a brokerage account during retirement while waiting to collect Social Security and beginning RMDs. Here's some basics for your consideration. 66-year-old retired, collect Social Security at 70. 3.2 million in a qualified, 770,000 in a brokerage account, and 440 of this is in T-bills. 150 is in equity ETFs, 150 is in a money market. I've also got 100,000 in a high yield savings, 91,000 in a RET that I'll be selling next year. And I plan to use these three accounts for living expenses and paying taxes on Roth Conversions. There's currently 400,000 in a Roth and there's no debt. Looking to convert up to the 24% tax bracket to Roth between now and RMD age 73, which will be in 2030. What am I missing with this strategy? And what other ways would you consider using the brokerage account during this interim? Thanks so much, Roger, and congratulations again. Love the podcast.
It's a great question, Teresa, and thank you for mapping it out in such an organized fashion. So my understanding is you're 66, you're going to take Social Security at 70. You have about 3.2 million qualified accounts, meaning pre-tax accounts, and then brokerage of 770 with a lot of T-bills, some REITs, some hybrid savings, and 400 in Roth. And then you want to convert up to the 24% tax bracket. So your question is a combination of the resilient pillar and the optimization pillar. You brought two different aspects into that. So how do you go about thinking about this? And in your case, it sounds like you're relatively well-funded for your retirement, depending on what your spending model is. So step one is, what is it you're trying to accomplish long-term? Is it you're doing some very aggressive Roth conversions to try to lower the RMDs? And I think that potentially could make sense. It will definitely give you more flexibility later on, and you have the after-tax cash to pay for some of those tax bills. So the way I would frame this, Teresa, is build out your cash flow forecast from age 66, let's just say through age 70, maybe even go to 73. What income sources do you have? And then what is the base great life spending that you are going to do each individual year for, say, the next at least 5 years? And that will tell you the deficit of monies that you're going to have to pull from your investment or your financial assets to cover the gap because there's no longer any work in the mix. Then map out exactly how you're going to pay for that gap. And that's going to have to come from your financial assets. And it sounds like you're in a relatively strong position in that you have a lot of liquidity. You have 100,000 in a high yield savings account. You have 440,000 in T-bills, and then you have various investments. So it sounds like you have a lot of liquidity. So good for you, because most people don't when they think about this. But what I want you to do after you build that 5-year cash flow forecast of earnings and spending, I want you to identify exactly which accounts you're going to pull that money from. If you need 100,000 each year, is that what the T-bills are for? If you need more than that, do you have enough liquidity for at least the 5 years? That's going to be job one, is you mapping out exactly which account and which investments are going to fund the gap between your earnings and your spending. Okay, so that's going to be step one. Step two is, yes, you do have a potential required minimum distribution issue because you have $3.2 million in qualified accounts. If we do some basic calculations on that $3.2 million, assuming you don't draw that money or convert it, at age 73, which will be 2030, you're going to have first year required minimum distributions around $170,000, assuming a 5% growth rate. So you could potentially be in higher tax brackets later in life and forevermore as these required minimum distributions ramp up. So how do you alleviate that? It sounds like you're going to pull a lever to do aggressive Roth conversions up to the 24% tax bracket. Don't think that's necessarily a bad idea if it fits your overall financial situation. Another thing that you could consider is, do you have charitable intent? And this goes back to, what do I want to accomplish? Because if you have some charitable intent, you have a couple other levers that you could pull. Number one is, while you're doing these Roth conversions, you could work with your tax expert to do larger charitable contributions in the years that you do large Roth conversions to help manage some of the tax burden of those large conversions. And if you don't know the charity that you want it to go to, you could use something like a donor advised fund where you can decide the charitable amounts that go in later. Another option that you could consider pulling, Teresa, is doing qualified charitable distributions once you reach 70 and a half. Currently, once you reach 70 and a half, you're allowed to do a distribution from an IRA directly to a qualified charity of up to $100,000, and that will help satisfy your required minimum distribution. But you can start doing that prior to age 73, and there's a quirk in the tax law right now that it's still kept that at 70 and a half. So that's another lever that you could pull. And it sounds like you have ample liquidity on the after-tax end to assist you in paying the taxes for these required minimum distributions. Ultimately, doing these kind of aggressive Roth conversions comes down to a judgment call. Am I comfortable paying the tax at 22 or 24%, knowing that I'm just choosing to pay the tax now and de-risking that part of it in terms of future tax code and future income? And it's not like you ever get out of a tax. It's just a timing, and you're just choosing to front load the tax. Definitely Roth assets are much nicer to give to your heirs because those distributions, even though they can't stretch like they used to, they won't create a tax burden for your heirs. And if you're married right now, Teresa, and this is something we always forget, is if you're married, we tend to do tax planning as filing joint. We're in the joint brackets. And if you've been married a long time like me, I'm 33 years, I always filed joint for the most part as an adult. But at some point, it's likely that one of you will pass, and then you go to the single brackets, but the assets stay the same. So that could be an unexpected tax burden to the surviving spouse. So I think through it that way. Make sure you have that cash flow forecast and you map out exactly how you're going to pay for your life, because that's the resilient pillar, and we want to make sure that's set. And then you can think about the most optimal way to do these Roth conversions or lower required minimum distributions. And the one thing I didn't hear you mention is, if you have charitable intent, you have a couple levers there to help manage the tax end of it. The last thing I'll say related to this as you're doing Roth conversions, because you're 66, is consider that when you do these Roth conversions, you're likely to go pretty high up in the IRMAA surcharges for Medicare. So make sure you factor that into some of your calculations. That might help you determine the amount of a Roth contribution, because those are a cliff. As soon as you go $1 over the next IRMAA bracket, you go to whatever the next pay scale is in terms of the surcharge. So you might be able to at least avoid an unforced error that's relatively minor but impacts you. Or you might make you group more of your Roth conversions into less years so you can have less years of this IRMAA surcharge that might impact you. So hopefully that gave you some perspective, Teresa. Thank you so much for the celebrating of 500 plus episodes. That's exciting. We're looking forward to being here for years to come. Our next question comes from Sue related to the Catchup Contributions. Yo, Roger, love the show. Been listening for a couple of years now. Well, thanks, Sue. Currently, Catchup Contributions can be made on a pre-tax or Roth basis, but Section 603 provides all Catchup contributions are subject to Roth tax treatment. Does this mean that the Catchup contribution would need to go into a Roth 401k because it would be taxed? And if so, if our retirement plan is to roll the 401k into an IRA at retirement, it would be good to open a Roth IRA now for some minimal funds to roll the Roth portion of the 401k into, so we don't run into the 5-year rule later. So I see your point on this new rule related to the Secure Act 2.0, Sue, and we actually got a little bit of administrative relief from the IRS back in August. So what Sue's referring to is Secure 2.0 mandated that if you make over $145,000, the catch-up contribution to a 401k or 403b would be required to go into the Roth option within that qualified plan, meaning that it would be taxed in the year that the monies went in. So that rule changed things. So if you were contributing your normal 401k contribution, we're doing your catch-up contribution into your pre-tax account when the Secure 2.0 came out. It's like, wait a second, you're going to have to start doing that into the Roth portion for the catch-up if you make over $145,000 a year. So this was a rule that came out, but in August, Sue, they announced a 2-year administrative transition period for this to occur, meaning that it's not going to take effect this year or in 2024. Now, to your point, if your plan is to move all of your 401k assets to an IRA and you don't currently have Roth in an IRA, maybe you didn't have the option, and you're thinking that you're going to start having some Roth catch-up contributions as a result of Section 603, it wouldn't hurt to set up a Roth IRA and fund it with minimal dollars. Even if you can't make a contribution to a Roth, you can still roll over a very small amount to the Roth IRA in order to get the 5-year clock starting on that Roth option. So I see your point, but you got a little bit of time to maneuver around this, Sue, but thanks for bringing that up. So our next question comes from Larry. He says, hey, Roger, love the show. Been listening for several years. I recently retired in July at age 58 and moved to an HSA eligible plan with my wife's employer. My former employer matched FSA, flexible savings account contribution, so I took advantage of that for several years. Am I able to contribute to the HSA this year? If so, can I contribute the entire maximum family limit of $9,750 with the catch-up for 2023, or do I have to prorate it for 5 months? We are on my wife's insurance. Thanks for all you do. So the short answer is yes, Larry. It's possible to contribute to the HSA, but there are a few things you need to be aware of. First is you want to make sure you're clear of the healthcare FSA ineligibility for the HSA. It's like military talk here. That means be aware of any carryover or grace periods, especially triggered by COBRA coverage. Basically, your flexible savings account from the first part of the year can't still be accessible and hold any remaining funds. So that's step one. Then you have to be on a high deductible plan, which it sounds like you are, to be HSA eligible in order to make contributions. Now the answer is, well, how much can you make since this is a partial year? And there are two potential options. General monthly contributions would be 1/12 limit per month. So for 5 months, that would be 5/12 of the HSA contribution limit for 2023. So it would be a prorated amount based on the period of time that you have been eligible, meaning that you're in an HSA compliant plan. The more aggressive option is what's called the last month rule. That means if you have an HSA eligible coverage on December 1st, say of 2023, through the 31st of 2024, the testing period, then you can make HSA contributions in 2023 to the full 12 months amount. And you don't really want to mess this up with the testing period, because not only will your contributions be ineligible if you fail that test, they will also be subject to a 10% penalty. So you may want to check with your tax preparer. I think it's Form 8889 gets filled out correctly at tax time. So our last question today comes from Patrick on selling a house. Recently, your show covered capital gains on a home sale and covered the conditions for a married couple. In my case, my wife passed away in 2013, and our house is still in both of our names. If I sell the house as part of downsizing in the next 2 years, what will I have to consider as my capital gains tax liability? My house was purchased in 1992 for $250,000, now has a market value of $750,000. I have about $75,000 in capital improvements during the lifespan of the house, so my total cost basis I estimate at $325,000. With all of these tax questions, by the way, Patrick and everyone else, I'm not a tax expert. I have to do a lot of tax planning and thinking around taxes and retirement, but I don't complete returns. So it's always important, especially when you're dealing with bigger dollars, that you consult someone that this is all they think about to make sure that they get this right. And there may be little nuances that I may not be aware of that they are because they think about this all day long that can help you avoid some pitfalls or maybe give you some benefit. So how does this work when you own a home and one of the spouses that has passed? And it's great that you've kept track of all these improvements that you've made because that definitely helps on the cost basis. So your house still has to be your primary residence for at least 2 of the last 5 years. And you can't have sold another house as a primary residence in terms of excluding capital gains in the same 2 years, which is known as a look-back period. Now, a married couple filing jointly or not yet married widow or widower who is selling their house within 24 months of their spouse's passing can exclude $500,000 in capital gains. Unfortunately, you're outside of that 24-month window. You will only be able to exclude up to $250,000 in capital gains. So in this instance, if you sold the house for $750,000 with a cost basis of $325,000, you have a gain of what? That's $425,000. Of those monies, the first $250,000 are going to be excluded, leaving you with a taxable long-term gain of $175,000. Now, just because that amount is going to be added to your tax return doesn't mean it has to be a huge tax bill. First, remember, capital gains are the lowest tax rates, and especially depending if you can manage your income, you may get preferential treatment below the 15 or the 20% tax rate on capital gains. And doing some forward planning might be beneficial for you. Ways you can offset your tax bill, including a multi-year large donation to, say, a donor-advised fund or charitable contributions. Obviously, selling investments at a loss, if you can clean up the portfolio and realize some losses to offset that gains, that would be definitely helpful. And if you're in the period, Patrick, of doing required minimum distributions, you could do a qualified charitable distribution like we've talked about before to offset the RMDs for that particular year, which would help lower your overall income as well. With that said, let's move on and talk with Kevin Lyles about passion in our Bring It On segment. Now it's time to bring it on and work on the passions you're going to have in retirement. And to help us out is retirement coach Kevin Lyles.
Hi, Roger. I want to talk about the role of leisure in retirement.
I think leisure is overrated, but let's talk about it.
Well, let's start with what do we mean by leisure in retirement? You know, when we're working, leisure is an activity that gives us a diversion from our work, right? It's pretty clear what leisure is, but when we're retired, leisure can take on a much bigger role, but it can't become the central focus of our life without losing that diversionary role. It's no longer as pleasurable if it's the central thing we're doing. It stops rejuvenating or refreshing us. So you want to live a leisurely life. You don't want to live a life of leisure. You like that quote? I stole that from someone.
I agree 100%. I'm joking that leisure is overrated, but too much of leisure is not a healthy life.
And leisure is very personal. So let's get this out of the way now. What one person enjoys and loves to do, another person would despise or find completely boring.
So what are some examples of that?
Give me your top 3 activities. I'll bet I only like 2 of them.
Leisure for me is going to be riding my mountain bike, rowing, reading.
Okay, so mountain bike, let's take that one. I've never done that, so I can't say whether I like it or not, but you get your heart rate up, you're sweaty, you're hot, you're worn out. It's a little dangerous, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of people for whom that would just be, no way, I'm not going to take that risk. I don't like to get hot and sweaty. I like to sit in an air-conditioned room. And so for you, it's your top leisure activity that you cited, or the first one you cited. For others, they wouldn't even consider doing it. So when you're thinking about leisure activities and how to build leisure activities into your retirement, you have to be a little selfish and be willing to choose activities that speak to you. The most successful retirees report that they engage in a variety of different leisurely activities that fulfill different needs they have. And your list that you gave there, Roger, from mountain biking to reading, very different things. So there are 6 categories of leisure that I want to talk about. And what I suggest for people as they're building their retirement life is to choose activities from several of these categories, whichever ones speak to you. And many activities can belong in 2 or 3 of these categories. Category number 1, social interaction. These are activities that are primarily focused on engaging with others. So examples would be going to a party, going to a dance, having lunch with a friend, playing cards, or having a game night with your friends. Those are all social interaction activities. Number 2, spectator appreciation activities. These are where you watch others participate in any kind of activity. So sporting events, concerts, parades, theater, opera, those kinds of things where the primary activity is watching others do something.
That's an unexpected one for me.
You don't think of that as leisure, or
no, it's totally leisure. I just wasn't expecting that one. That's all.
Okay. Number 3, and this is one that I wish I spent more time in. My wife spends a lot more time than I do, and that is creative expression. These are activities that tap into your own creativity, your own unique gifts. Examples: doing art, playing music. Maybe it's cooking a meal. Maybe it's building something. These are creative expression activities. I'm not a particularly creative person.
Incorrect. That is a story you tell yourself. You're very creative, but I understand that. I tell myself that as well.
If you ask me to tell you my top 5 or 10 leisure activities, I don't think any of them would fit into this category. I probably need to work more on it. Number 4, though, that I do like to participate in is intellectual stimulation. These are activities designed to enhance your mind. So it's reading to learn, attending a lecture, or taking a course, crossword puzzles. It doesn't have to be hard. Learning a language, learning how to play an instrument. All of these are designed to engage your mind. And I do a lot of these. I go from topic to topic. Lately, my topic has been longevity, studying longevity, trying to figure out what can I do to improve mine and my family's. And so that's been an area that I've been really trying to learn about. And I find it a fascinating area. I'll move on to something else in 6 months. I'll have another one. Category 5, and this is what a lot of people think about when we talk about leisure: physical exercise. These are activities that enhance your body. So working out, playing sports, running, walking, swimming, doing yoga, all the kinds of things that we do when we say we're trying to improve our health fall into the physical exercise category. And then finally, number 6, and one that a lot of us ignore to our own detriment, is solitary relaxation. These are activities intentionally done alone, meant to enhance our mind, our spirit, our spirituality. So things like meditation, reading for enjoyment, bird watching. Some people go out bird watching, or just taking a walk in the woods. Gardening is one that can be great for solitary relaxation. Knitting is another one that you think about when you think of the proverbial retiree sitting around in the rocking chair knitting. That's solitary relaxation. Being with yourself is an important part of exploring who you want to be, I think.
When I hear those, I think of a concept we've talked about before in terms of habit stacking.
Mm-hmm.
Many of these things go together, right? I think of, meditation. I meditate literally, but I think of mountain bike as meditation, right? It clears my mind. I'm present. You can't be having random thoughts. It's social. It's physical, right? All of these are elements that we just want to be intentional, right? We don't have to have some grand plan. We just got to be intentional about them.
Right. And try to check off a lot of these boxes. And as you say, mountain biking, it could be a social activity if you go do it with friends. It could be solitary relaxation if you just go up by yourself. Might not be safe to do that. I don't know. Do you go by yourself? You probably do.
Typically, I'm always by myself.
Yeah. It can fit a number of these boxes. And that's what's great, is choosing activities so that you're growing your life.
The one I have the hardest of all of those is the social part of it. I mean, I have a lot of social connections with you and with club members and with my team, but not locally. I don't have a lot of social connection. It's always been an area that for some reason I've never focused.
Yeah, you just have to find the right activities, the right leisurely activities. Pickleball's been a good one for me. I can't tell you how many people I meet on a weekly basis playing pickleball with strangers. Now, are these close friends? No. Will any of them become close friends? Perhaps. But it is social interaction. The conversations we have while we're waiting on a court are great. They're exactly what you want. So I do think if you choose the right leisure activities and put yourself in a position to be around people, interacting with people, it'll help in that area.
So we'll have a list of these areas in Six Shot Saturday so you can remember them and maybe journal on them or think about them so you can make sure that you hit them. If you're not signed up for Six Shot Saturday, just go to, sixshotsaturday.com or rogerwhitney.com, and you can get our weekly summary where we share the summary and as well as links.
Can I leave you with a quote?
You can leave me with anything you want, buddy.
I'll leave with a quote. Leisure reminds us that our sole purpose in life is not simply to do, but to be.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a little baby step we can take in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. All right, in the next 7 days, we're going to do some year-end housekeeping on the financial front. And the first action for you is related to capital gains, like we were just talking about with Patrick in that segment. What I'd suggest that you do is look at all of your after-tax accounts and tally up the interest that you've earned in your bank accounts and CDs and treasuries. Tally up the realized capital gains that you have received. Maybe you sold some investments and realized some gains. Maybe you realized some losses. So you can start to get a read on the interest income that you've received. I would do the dividend income. You can get these reports from most financial firms, either year-to-date interest income or dividend income, year-to-date realized capital gains. It should give you a listing of everything bought and sold. And start to make a small little basic spreadsheet showing these income sources that you're going to have come in or that you've had come in this year. In addition to that, if you've taken withdrawals from IRAs, individual retirement accounts, or pre-tax 401k accounts, list out the amounts that you've taken out of those accounts as well. Basically, what you're doing is starting to build the scaffolding to get an idea of what your taxable income is going to look like for 2023. Once you've built this out, you can try to estimate how much more in dividends or IRA distributions you have between now and the end of the year, so you can have a handle on what type of taxable income you're going to have. So that's going to be step one. And what you can do with that, and you probably, I don't know if the new TurboTax and all the financial or tax planning software is out. You can start to build out a tax estimate using, say, TurboTax or some other tool, so you can see what tax bracket you're in, and that may expose or bring to light some opportunities, maybe to do Roth conversions or to realize some capital gains and get a preferential rate, or some risks of what it might do to your ACA subsidies. Are you close to IRMA surcharges, etc.? So step one this month, just start to make a simple spreadsheet and get the year-to-date distributions that you've received from these various sources. Well, thanks for hanging out with me this week. This week, I am actually on a little vacation with some younger retirement planners. I'm like the old guy in the group. This is our annual golf trip. So I'm like the house dad, I think is what they call me. So I will make good choices, as you should too. And we will chat next week. And next week, we're going to continue to answer your questions. What's the title question next week? Let's see. Oh, should we consolidate our accounts? So we'll have a chat about that and other things. Have a great day. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and does not guarantee future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. Make sure you consult your legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions.